In 2020, something didn't add up. When fear replaced common sense and critical thinking, and protocols stopped matching what we were seeing, a lot of us started asking questions. And once you start digging, once you start researching, you can't unsee it. Welcome to Nurses Out Loud. I'm Jody O'Malley, ER nurse and nursing ethics educator. And this is where we talk truth, patient rights, and real-world healthcare so you can make informed decisions and advocate with confidence. If you've been looking for your people, here we are. If this resonates, if you find yourself nodding along, please like, follow, and share this show with at least one person who needs it. And if this episode offers continuing education credit, check the show notes for learning objectives, disclosures, and exactly how to earn your certificate. This episode of Nurses Out Loud is sponsored by West Cocoa Pharmacy in Cocoa, Florida. If you've been looking for a pharmacy that thinks outside the one-size-fits-all box, West Cocoa Pharmacy partners with licensed prescribers to create individualized prescription-only compounded medications. That includes ivermectin, benbendazole, fenbendazole, and other repurposed drugs, alike low-dose naltrexone, methylene blue, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, custom erectile dysfunction combinations for men, and carefully selected supplements. They also support integrative oncology care, offering compounded medications that some physicians use in alternative cancer protocols. One of my favorite parts is their free consult with Nurse Donna. She's there to provide education on evolving repurposed therapies and HRT, so you can ask better questions and have a more informed conversation with your own clinician. As always, this is not medical advice. I'm not telling you what to take. I'm pointing you to resources. Any medication or protocol should be decided between you and a licensed provider who knows your history. To learn more, visit Cocoa Pharmacy, COCOA Pharmacy.com. That's Cocoa Pharmacy, COCOA Pharmacy.com, and let them know you heard about them on Nurses Out Loud. Today's episode is for nurses. After 2020, a lot of us stopped accepting because we said so as an answer and started reading for ourselves. And once you research, you can't unsee it. I'm not here for slogans. I'm here because the biggest missing piece in bedside change and in our communities is ethics literacy. Nurses are advocates first. We have a duty to truth-telling, to wholeness of character, and to giving patients the information they need to make informed decisions. My own journey, blowing the whistle, being dragged through complaints, and ultimately being cleared, didn't make me cynical. It made me more committed to teaching nurses how to think, document, communicate, and lead with moral courage. Today isn't a rally, it's a pressure test. I reached out through a friend to some very pro-vaccine, left-leaning nurses and asked for their toughest questions so we're not living in an echo chamber. And with me today is someone I've been following for 5 years and respect very much, attorney Aaron Siri, managing partner at Siri Glimstad and author of Vaccines, Amen. He's known for litigation and public records fights, seeking access to vaccine-related data. Aaron, welcome to Nurses Out Loud.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. So let's just get started with these questions from the nurses. A lot of nurses, they roll their eyes at claims like 72 jabs. What do you say to nurses who feel the debate is polluted by bad numbers?
Do they roll their numbers because it's a lot or because they're saying the number is not reflective of reality?
Correct. They don't believe it. They don't believe that it's 72 jabs.
Well, and all you need to do is pull up the CDC schedule. Well, go to the one from 2 days ago, not the one from yesterday. So, I mean, it's not hard to get to 72. I guess it matters how you're counting. And I'm talking just about the childhood schedule. I mean, we can quickly kind of start going through the math. I don't want to bore anybody, but
Yeah.
there's 19 doses of flu because you give at 6 months and 7 months, so 2 to a baby. And then it's 1 year thereafter. So you got 19 right there for flu. For COVID vaccine, when it was routine in early 2025, you get 3 doses to a baby, the Pfizer vaccine. So it's at 6 months, 7 months, and 9 months, and then it's 1 year every yearly thereafter. So that's 20 doses. So you're already
Mm.
at 39. Okay, throw in 3 more for Hep B, 5 for DTaP, 1 for Tdap, 3 more for Hib, 4 for IPV, I believe, or 4 for Hib, or
Mhm.
3 or 4 for Hib, depending on which brand. 4 for IPV. Is it 3 for for pneumococcal, or 4? 3, I think. And then you've got 2 for MMR, 2 for chickenpox, 2 Hep A, 2, well, depending on HPV, what age you get, it's 2 or 3 shots. I'll just stop there.
Right.
That you're already at a quite big number. And let's not forget the Tdap during pregnancy, as well as a flu shot during pregnancy, and then an RSV vaccine potentially during pregnancy.
Mhm.
And they were recommending COVID vaccine for pregnancy in the beginning of last year. So that's 4 in utero. And by the way, as you know, if you look at the pregnancy schedule, there's a whole host of others you could potentially give during pregnancy as well. I mean,
Yeah.
shoot, the baby in utero could get 6, 7 vaccines even if the mother's indicated for it. That's before they're even born. And then,
Right.
so I could tell you that as of, last year, the beginning of last year, a baby was getting, including utero, 29 vaccines by the first birthday, on or before the first birthday. It was 29. So, and that's just by the first birthday. So, yeah, it's not hard to get to see.
Okay. All right. The next
It's just
question.
math and it's on the CDC schedule. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, really,
I'm
all
not
you
sure
have to
what to
do is
say.
just pull it up and look at it. It's interesting to me that they're just like, no, that's impossible. That's impossible. But the same nurses, they say so. Some nurses have lived through severe measles, meningitis, tetanus, flu hospitalizations, and their core belief is vaccines prevent tragedy and protect public health. What's your ethical
Mhm.
response to that, nurse?
Anybody who wants a vaccine should be able to get it. So get it. If you want them, get them. But
Mhm.
those who choose not to receive them usually have quite a good reason to not get them. Either they've been injured by one of them, one of their family members have had an issue with it, or they have some other complication or reason not to get it, or sometimes they have a moral objection to it. They don't want to, inject a vaccine like the MMR vaccine that in every single vial has billions of pieces of the cultured cell line of DNA and cellular debris from the cultured cell line of an aborted fetus.
Mhm.
Some people have a moral objection to that, others don't. And for anybody who thinks what I just said that is just a fact, that's again the CDC FDA documentation regarding the MMR vaccine in terms of its content. And so I think that if you want to get the vaccine, you should be free to do it. If you believe they have an efficacy profile in the manner that you just described it, free to
Mhm.
have that opinion. I'm not sure that the influenza vaccine, for example, the studies don't support that it has an impact, a material impact.
Yeah.
There's a whole line of studies that do not reflect that it has a material impact on death and hospitalizations,
Mhm.
nor the transmission of the influenza virus. There are also many studies, by the way, that show that those that have had the influenza vaccine, for example, while they don't have an increased rate of influenza infections and maybe have a reduction in infections, different, by the way, than whether it prevents transmission, hospitalizations, or death, they do have a multiple times rate of non
Mm.
influenza respiratory infections. There's a whole line of studies like that. I cite them in my book.
Mhm.
And so, if you're even talking about patient care with influenza vaccine, then getting the influenza vaccine, while it may potentially reduce your likelihood of having influenza, it apparently, according to a number of studies, increases the likelihood that you have non respiratory influenza virus infection of some kind.
Mm.
And the rates were huge in some of those. And then you mentioned meningitis, meningococcal. I mean, the meningococcal vaccine, if we're talking about meningococcal ACWY, the immunity lasts about 5 years at most, according to their own data. They only recommend it during teenage years, and there's no subsequent doses recommended, meaning, again, it's at most personal protection. For disease that doesn't really, they happen in random. Those strains of meningococcal just pop up, one in
Mhm.
40, 50,000 folks. They don't, it's not like a typical communicable disease. So I don't really understand what it is. I mean, and Inflammation of the meninges is one thing, and that can be caused by a whole host of
Yeah.
things. But the meningococcal vaccine, ACWY and MenB, protect against some, very narrow specific strains that are at best personal protection. So you want to get them, get them. Don't want to get them. And for the measles vaccine, again, measles vaccine can prevent transmission, unlike the other ones. But
Hmm.
measles, around 400 Americans died a year before there was a measles vaccine in the late 50s, early 60s. Every death is a tragedy, but that's far from the millions of deaths that make you think measles caused before there was a vaccine. It's only about, I mean, it was, you know, n- uh, at a time when there was about 4.2 million births a year, 400 deaths. We have about
Hmm.
3.8 million births a year right now. And measles mortality had declined by over 98% between 1900 and 1962. Early first measles vaccine was 1963. That mortality decline had nothing to do, zero to do with the measles vaccine because it didn't exist. That decline was likely to continue. Parts of this country back in the late 50s, early 60s were still like a developing country where any infection could kill children.
Hmm.
And the studies have actually shown there might be an ecological reason why measles, unlike other pathogens, did not disappear off it could be because studies reflect that those who've had measles have far less rates of cardiovascular death
Hmm.
and cancers. Those studies are uniform. They're all in PubMed. You can look at them. They're certainly inconvenient. 100,000 person study out of Japan tracked 100,000 Japanese prospectively, forward looking, for over 20 years. Government of Japan, institutions, highly looked at all kinds of variables, found that men had a 20% reduction in cardiovascular death if they had measles and mumps. Think about that.
Yeah.
Cardiovascular disease killed 900,000 Americans. If eliminating measles, which the vaccine has done, has resulted in even a 1% increase in cardiovascular deaths,
Hmm.
you're quite upside down on your, even on a life years basis, your public health benefit. And then you could talk about cancers. And these are smaller, less robust studies, but they're consistent from major institutions. Those who've gotten, for example, kids that have never had measles have a 66% increased rate of Hodgkin's lymphoma and a 166 increased rate of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. That killed 20,000 people last year in the United States. If eliminating measles has caused even a part of that increase, you're very quickly upside down on your public health benefits. So, you know,
Hmm.
um, um, uh, looking at these products as they are, which are products,
Hmm.
rather than with kind of the emotional overlay you just expressed to me is important. And we should be able to rationally look at the totality of the risks and the benefits of these products. And I didn't even get into the risks. I would just talked about the benefits just now.
Right. Right. And it's interesting because when she did ask that question, I said, well, how many cases of lockjaw have you seen in your 40 years of nursing? And she said 2. And I was like, "Okay, again, it's a very emotional response, so thank you for that." Here, moving on. So most nurses assume that vaccines are tested in large, long, placebo-controlled trials. Nurses hear placebo-controlled trials, we automatically think saline is the placebo before they even hit the schedule. And so when we're talking about the placebo controlled trials that were done on all of these childhood vaccines, basically, was it saline that was used?
No, there's not been a placebo controlled trial that was relied upon to license a single one of the routine injected vaccines on the childhood schedule. Not only that, just to be very clear, when a vaccine was used as a control, which can be appropriate because if it's the standard of care, it
Mhm.
should be used as the control, but it has to be properly licensed itself. That vaccine, when it was used, another vaccine was used as a control, also was not licensed based on the placebo controlled trial and down the chain. You will not find down the chain a placebo controlled trial out upon to license any of the vaccines that are routinely administered to children on the CDC's childhood schedule. It just doesn't exist. And by the way, if you're a nurse out there, you, very easy way to check me. The next time you administer a vaccine, go open the box, pull out the package insert, go to section 6.1, which is under federal regulations required to summarize a clinical trial relied upon to license that product, and read it and look for yourself. what was the control? You will never find a placebo control. And there's two exceptions where they will say the word placebo, like in the chickenpox package insert, but it's not a placebo because the underlying report, and I lay this out in my book, shows that it was actually an injection that included aluminum adjuvant and thimerosal. That's not a placebo. So you will find none of them had a placebo control. And by the way, as you read those package inserts, you should hopefully see that even if they did have a placebo control, the trials were still not useful to assessing safety because they virtually never track safety for long enough, often days or weeks after injection only. And even if they had a placebo control, and even if they review safety for long enough, which none of them do, they're often underpowered. They don't have enough kids in them. And you need those three features at a minimum, as well as blinding and so forth, to have a proper, robust trial that actually will assess whether the product is safe, certainly of whether the benefits outweigh the risks. And again, if you doubt what I'm saying, either go to that package insert or go to the FDA website. Go to Google and type in, FDA licensed vaccines. They're all on one page on the FDA website. Click into each one and take a look and see for yourself. And when you find that another vaccine was used as a control, go look up the package insert for that vaccine or look at the underlying clinical trial report. There's often a summary basis of approval document available where you also can see the clinical trial relied upon for safety. I mean, we could go through each one, but it's just
No.
a fact for each.
So what you're saying is that these trials, clinical trials, they lasted days, maybe weeks. Now for nurses, our education, and same with doctors, is basically when that day comes, is here's the childhood schedule, they're safe and effective, and this is what you do if you notice a reaction. We're taught that they're so safe, and they have been researching these for decades because they've been given for decades, that there is these long post-market surveillance of them. Okay. So our only education, nurses and doctors, is Benadryl. You're going to notice, first of all, you're going to notice an adverse reaction because it's going to happen right in front of you. And this is what you get: Benadryl, anti-inflammatories, whatever. But we're not taught about VAERS. We're not taught to, when that child comes in, to ask, did you just, that's how my practice has changed, Aaron. Now, when I triage people in the ER and I have a baby coming in with a fever, I say, were you vaccinated? If so, when? So these are the questions that I think nurses need to know and to be able to document, because that would signal, a VAERS report. But we won't go down that whole line. Is there post-market surveillance of these vaccines?
Now, the post-marketing literature is virtually vacuous when it comes to vaccine safety. I know they claim these are the most thoroughly studied products that exist pre and post licensure. Those are just words. It's not reality. I can tell you that our firm, which has over 50 folks that do vaccine work, including about 20 of them that do vaccine injury claims, and we can't sue vaccine manufacturers. Okay, they're the vaccines are the only product in America, the only one that you cannot sue if your child is seriously injured or killed. The manufacturer to claim, had they made the product safer, your kid wouldn't have been injured or killed, or you wouldn't have been injured or killed. It's the only product that has that immunity. It came about something called the National Child Vaccine Injury Act 1986. It's been around since 1986. But we do bring claims in this little federal program called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. It's not really a court. It's more of a policy program that just compensates certain conditions that happen very quickly. They paid out over $5 billion. But in any event, we need good clinical trial data because we have to often prove the vaccine caused the injury. And we don't get any discovery in this program. That's why I don't call it a court. We don't get a discovery. We don't get to depose. We don't get document requests. So how are we going to prove it? Oftentimes we need the existing scientific literature. So we need good clinical trial data. Unfortunately, unlike drugs where they do multi-year placebo-controlled trials for many drugs, they don't do that for vaccines, as you went through, maybe up to 6 months safety review. But that data is not useful for the most part in terms of establishing safety or otherwise really looking for harms. So then we got to go to the post-marketing literature. And even the post-marketing literature is mostly vacuous. Don't even take my word for it. You could look what the Institute of Medicine had to say. Back in the Institute of Medicine was commissioned by HRSA and the CDC. HRSA is the agency that defends the vaccine injury claims. So they commissioned the Institute of Medicine to review what they said were the 158 most commonly claimed injuries, serious injuries from various childhood vaccines. Okay. And obviously, what they wanted the IOM to say is that the vaccines don't cause them. So they could
Mhm.
use it as defense in vaccine court. But the Institute of Medicine, trying as they could, paid as much money as they were by the CDC and HRSA, came back and said for 130 something of them, sorry, you haven't done the science. We can't tell you whether the vaccines cause it or don't cause it. For about 18 of them, yeah, we found the vaccine is causally related. For about 5, it's not causally related. But for almost all of them, the rest, you got to do the science. We don't know. You got
Mhm.
to do it. You haven't done the studies. And that's what I mean by it's vacuous. The studies to actually assess even the most commonly claimed injuries, according to the CDC and HRSA, from vaccines have not been done.
Have not been done. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you go argue with the Institute of Medicine report, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
That's again, that's just a reality.
Right,
It's
because
inconvenient. It doesn't
mhm.
fit what you're told. I know it can cause cognitive dissonance for medical professionals because we're assured they're the most thoroughly safety. It's just not true.
It's not true. And that to me, it was one of the biggest things that I found out that really shook my faith in healthcare. And I think leading into the next question, I think what happened, like I said in the beginning, in 2020, I just got my master's degree. I was educating. I loved it. I've worked in all different fields of nursing. And then I come to find, well, first of all, I saw the fear. I mean, to me, it was just very blatant that what I was seeing online was propaganda. It was fear, fear, fear was just pushing the narrative. And then all of our protocols at the bedside change, all of our standards of care change. But it probably took me, Aaron, about another year and a half after I blew the whistle in September of 21, publicly come out and say, if you're asking me my opinion, would I inject my child today? That answer would be no. But that's how much, that's a belief system. And that's why I love your book. I mean, your book is just laid out perfectly. In the beginning, you talk about the godfather of vaccinology, Stanley Plotkin, and you did make reference to the vaccines that do have the immortal fetal cell line. And guys, in the show notes, I'm going to put the deposition with Stanley Plotkin. I think it's almost 8 hours. I watched the entire thing as I was coming back from Europe, and it's just mind-blowing how little even the godfather of vaccines, quote unquote, even knew about the questions that you are asking him. So kudos to you, Aaron, on that. Now we have HHS coming out and saying, not recommending as many vaccines. We're looking at other countries, say Denmark, for example, and seeing what they do and what they recommend. So they just slash the vaccines off of the recommended childhood schedule. So if a vaccine is removed from the routine childhood schedule, does that change anything about coverage or compensation, being able to sue, any legal exposure to the vaccine manufacturers now?
Well, on the coverage, the vaccines will all remain available, is what they've
Mhm.
announced, and they will also continue to be covered by CMS, Medicare, Medicaid, and hence that typically means downstream by all insurance providers. So everybody can still get the vaccine, inject as many as you want, and they'll still be covered for free, pretty much.
Mhm.
In terms of liability protection, um, the vaccine needs to be routinely recommended for it to receive the immunity protection. Now, when it's routinely recommended, it's added something called the vaccine injury table. And when it's on that table, it is effectively afforded the immunity that you think about that I discussed earlier, where basically pharma and physicians can kill or seriously injure your child with impunity for the most part. And you can't go back and say, hey, had you made this product safer, my kid would have been dead. Asbestos in my walls, I got cancer, I can sue you. My gas tank blows up, I could sue you. You could have made it safer. You didn't put a little plastic blade, cover on a saw blade. So I wouldn't have finger. I could sue you. Think of every product you encounter every single day. The reason they're safer Is it because the company has the economic self-interest to make them safer? They don't want to lose money. They just don't have it with these products. It's the only one that really doesn't have it. But the prerequisite to getting that immunity is it needs to be routine. And if it is routine, it gets added to the vaccine injury table. So the next step now would be for the HHS to remove it, because it can do that now,
Mhm.
to remove it from the vaccine injury table. And the lawsuits can then begin to hold these companies accountable for all of the harms that are being caused by these products. And that is not only there to compensate those injured properly, not by the kind of compensation they get in this program where it's extremely limited and they have their hands tied behind their back, but also that will finally drive the pharmaceutical companies to make better and safer products. They will be forced to.
Yeah, I was listening to a doctor speak on the COVID vaccine. And when it was approved to be under EUA, he had said that when it's an experiment, well, you don't want to say experimental, when it's an investigational product under emergency use authorization, that the vials for the same label, same vaccine, the contents inside of them could be different. They don't always all have to be the same. And the reason for that is that the manufacturers can look at the lot numbers on those different vials and see which one was better over time or the one that had harms. Do you know anything about that?
Well, in biological products, I mean, there are variability, but from batch to batch, dose to dose, even. In fact, Christopher actually was known as Mr. Aluminium. He's the most published author on aluminum in the world. And he, at the University of Kiel, he did an analysis of numerous childhood vaccines on the US schedule and looked at lots of different batches. And what he found was there's wide variability in the amount of aluminum adjuvant content. For some of them, it had far more than what was on the label, and for some, it had far less than what was on the label. And it varied from dose to dose that he analyzed. And so that, even amongst, these doses he was looking at, we actually, on behalf of the Informed Consent Action Network, ICANN, which is a nonprofit, our firm represents and that funds a lot of the vaccine policy work we do, we have petitioned the FDA, it's been years now, for these 13 different vaccines where the aluminum content varied widely from the package insert amount. And we said,
Mhm.
hey, too much, that's not safe. Too little, that's not, I mean, that could be efficacy issues. All right. Also could cause safety issues too. To date, they still have not formally provided a response. When we asked them, we said, look, can you confirm this is wrong or pause the product until you get it right? Just do one of the two. Just show us that this is wrong or pause it until you get the manufacturers to get the amount of aluminum adjuvants, proper. So at least it matches the label. Not that aluminum adjuvants are somehow good or are not seriously problematic. They are.
Mhm.
But yes, I think to your point, there is wide variability. And you may be referring to something different, which is that they used to distribute lots of vaccines to the same geography. So they would give one lot to one area and one lot to another. And there was an incident where there was a cluster of babies that all died from the same lot in one geographical area. And so thereafter, what they did is started to randomize the distribution of lots. And
Mhm.
so they don't send lots to one geographical location anymore. They mix them up and they send them across the country. So
Mhm.
there's no, they're not, there aren't too many lots in vials of doses from one lot in any particular area.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack between all of that, but I hope you guys that this is at least enough information to get you started on the critical thinking of what your role is as a nurse. I mean, as a nurse, we get a doctor's order, but we are liable individually for following through with that. We have got to make sure that patients have informed consent and that the risk and benefits, and also too, my practice has changed as well in regards to that. I'll print out that sheet and I'll go drop it off and to the patient and have them read it without me in the room instead of coming in with the sheet and the shot and saying, okay, Do you have any questions? Well, I make sure that they have some time to unpack that. But what advice would you give to nurses that are wrestling with their conscience and that maybe they don't vaccinate themselves and they're getting these orders to do it? I think a lot of us now are more in tune with our code of ethics and actually what that compels us to do, and that's educate. But what would you say to those nurses, like how they could give the vaccine and make sure that their patient, has the information, or where can they guide them? I mean, for me, I give out the highwire.com, I give out I Can Decide, tell them to look at that, if they're even questioning it. And I make sure that, they know they don't have to take anything.
Well, the first step, I think, is to stop believing in these products and start thinking about them and recognize that they're products. They're just products. They don't have magical powers. If you were actually going to give true informed consent about these products, that starts with actually understanding that a lot of what you are told about vaccines, unfortunately, are not true. But don't take my word for it. Nobody should take my word for it. You should see it for yourself, because I wouldn't believe it if somebody had just told me what I just said, or a lot of the stuff I just said in this interview. I think seeing the primary sources is really important. And you just pointed out some great resources. ICanDecide.org has a Get Informed section. There's a 2-pager, there's a 10-pager, there's a 20-pager, there's a 80-page exchange with HHS about vaccine safety. Whatever your attention span is, start there, read all of that. I've obviously, as you pointed out, I took the time to write a whole book on exactly this issue that just glaze it all out in a way I think is even fun and engaging, as I tried. And so, you could read that, but get educated on it. The claim that millions would die without a vaccines in America is off by 99.9%. The claim that they're robust is studied before licensure, no. After licensure, not true either. And when you understand all of that, and then you start drilling down in specific vaccines, you get a better appreciation of it. If nothing else, when a family says, I don't want it, you'll understand why maybe. Oftentimes, the
Mhm.
families don't want it either have had a personal experience with it that's negative, they or somebody they love, or they've actually studied these products and they have a better understanding about the real risks and benefits. I give one quick example, because it's been in the news lately, hepatitis B vaccine. So for a non-Hep B positive mother, okay, how many, if you want to really think about what are the risks versus the benefits, you'd ask how many needed to vaccinate, how many shots in the arm do you need to prevent one chronic case of Hep B amongst a child, and that number is north of 100,000. You need to vaccinate probably around over 100,000 kids born to non-Hep B positive mothers to prevent one chronic case of hepatitis B amongst during childhood. Compare it to how many serious adverse events and deaths are caused by the hepatitis B vaccine. And I can tell you, based on my assessment, you're far more likely to get injured than you are to prevent a chronic case in a non-Hep B positive mother. In fact,
Mhm.
there was a child who died of a Hep B vaccine on the first day of life. I was adjudicated in this program I told you about as having died from that B vaccine. You know what never kills a child on the first day of life? Hepatitis B itself. The
Mhm.
vaccine has. So, you can step back and you can think about these things. You can independently think about them. I mean, so that's Hep B vaccines. I mean, for the
Yeah.
influenza vaccine, just take a look at the safety profile too. So I would just start by getting educated on these products, and at the end of the day, whatever you come out on them on, always respect the patient's decisions in that
Yeah.
regard, and protect your patients if they choose not to take these products. Everybody should be free to take them if they want, but if they don't, protect them and protect their right to make that decision without penalty, without calling, threats of CPS, Child
Yeah.
Protection Services, and the insanity I often hear when we get
Mhm.
calls about what happens in medical settings when a parent refuses a vaccine.
Yeah, it depends on the belief system of the nurse, basically, because we're the ones who make the call. It's not policy where, if somebody refuses a treatment that we're automatically calling CPS. And that's why it's so important for me to educate nurses on the code of ethics, because That really, I like to, make the comparison is like the Christian, the Bible guides the believer, just like the code of ethics needs to guide the nurse. And we just don't talk about it enough. And it's another thing that's just brushed over in school, like, you should follow this code. But it was that code that gave me the courage and the education to know that, well, you guys helped me with the education piece of it, but it was the code that made me understand that what my conscience was telling me, that what I should be doing as a nurse, like when I saw a specific danger to public health, that, hey, I need to do something dramatic here because nobody's listening to me. Going on with nursing school, I get this question all the time. Jody, my daughter wants to go, my son wants to go to nursing school. Help us with the vaccine. They don't want to take it. What's your, question to them?
So, well, I would start. So on our website, SiriLLP.com, that's my firm website. There's a vaccine exemption section. There's actually, I believe, a specific section for medical students, people in nursing school, including when they go on rotation, because most schools and in most states, you can get an exemption from vaccination. They don't advertise it, but you can for attending, a professional, any kind of professional school. And then obviously, if you're employed as a medical professional, there's Title VII protections. If you have a conviction against taking one or more vaccines that protect you, the complexity often comes in when you're on rotation. You're technically not in school and you're not an employee, but we have a way of helping folks get an exemption in that context as well. And you can read about it on our website. And obviously, if you also need direct help, you can contact us, but or you can contact others out there for assistance. But it's very, very rare that there isn't a situation where if you understand what the available options are and you use the right legal methods, that you shouldn't be able to get you should be able to get an exemption in even in those settings.
Yes, I've been on your website. I've sent a bunch of people. It's very affordable. It's not, you need a $10,000 retainer type situation, guys. So definitely check out his website. I'll put the links and resources and everything in my show notes. Okay, Aaron. So closing out here, what are some of the cases that you're most proud of?
Oh, phew. Well, the ones I'm most proud of are the ones that protect people's civil individual rights to be able to choose whether they want to get the products or not. Restoring a religious exemptions for kids in Mississippi to attend school. They had been excluded from school since 1979 and finally got to be able to go back to school, if their parents had a religious conviction contrary to giving one or more of these products. We brought suits that prevented the discharge over 10,000 members of the U.S. Air Force and United States Army who refused a COVID-19 vaccine. Very proud about that. I mean, it's quite an honor to fight for the folks who literally fight to protect our freedoms here, who swear an oath to protect our Constitution and the freedoms they're under. And have brought lawsuits that have struck down laws that permit vaccinating minors without parental consent. We've brought lawsuits that have struck down vaccine requirements and other air flu shot requirements, COVID vaccine requirements, and other. But overall, I mean, the lawsuits that I'm the most proud of are the ones that really protect people's rights, because at the end of the day, most people, they'll choose to get a vaccine. It's those who choose not to that really have a reason not to get it. And yet, by then excluding them from school, kicking them out of work, you add insult to injury. I mean, that is really what you're doing in the worst possible way. We have a family in California whose child had transverse myelitis, ended up in a wheelchair, and then they want to throw the kid out of school because he won't get more vaccines. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an incredible injustices that are hard to believe. I'll tell you, my very first vaccine case I ever did, I believe it was my very first one, was on behalf of a nurse
Mm,
who suffered from very severe case of POTS after a flu shot that she was required to get as a
mhm,
nurse. So
mhm.
she got, and it was and brought it in that program I mentioned earlier, the vaccine injury compensation program.
Yeah, that some people are in for decades and they still are waiting
Yeah,
to get their case
we,
heard.
yeah, I mean, some of the most, man, we do so, folks who need transplants who they're refusing because they won't take a COVID vaccine are incredible situations.
Right now, I know you just briefly touched on that, but I think a lot of people don't believe that as well. I
Oh yeah.
believe it's still even to this day
Oh
that if
yeah.
you don't have a COVID
We
shot,
just
you
had a
can't
kid.
get.
We just had a case last week where they're basically going to let somebody die if they refuse a COVID vaccine. It's incredible. I'll tell you one of the most incredible cases where they were a dad was going to give his kidney to his son, but they wouldn't let the dad give the kidney unless the dad got the COVID shot.
Just like really like you guys, I mean, really, truly, if this has
Insane.
not woken you
How
up.
about a kid? You're going to love this one.
Ever felt torn between your conscience and your job? You're not alone. It's time for nurses to rise, to lead with integrity, grit, and faith. Earn CEUs that teach you how to stand firm in truth and advocate without fear at righteousrn.com. That's righteousrn.com. Protect your license, your integrity, and your peace.
It was a case where for a heart transplant, okay, for think about that, young man, heart transplant, and yet you're going to require a COVID shot where it causes cardiovascular issues. It's like beyond. It's just it's not, and this is why I call it a religion. There's what public health officials tell you, and then there's what the evidence actually shows, and that's why I wrote the book.
Yes, and it's amazing. I mean, really, truly, I have so much love and respect for you. To to for you to do what you did and really take on this big pharma. And for me, I mean, it's just like this big circle moment. You know, when my eyes were opened in 2020, I found out about RFK Jr. And now he's head of HHS and just has done so amazing things. Just today, they announced changing out the food pyramid. I mean, yeah, you guys have just meant so much to me in my journey. And really, whenever I do a clip of you speaking, because guys, all you have to do is search his name and you can even go to my website or my social media. I mean, millions and millions of views. People are hungry for the truth. And thank you so much for being here, Aaron. Oh, here's my takeaway for you nurses. Like, you don't have to become anti anything to become ethically competent. Nursing, our role is advocacy first, patient first. We owe patients honesty, clarity, and informed consent. We owe ourselves wholeness of character and the courage to resist institutional pressure when it conflicts with our ethical duties. If you're pro vaccine, I'm not asking you to switch tribes here. I'm asking you to verify what you assume. If you're skeptical, I'm asking you to be precise and disciplined because credibility matters. And that's why I teach ethics, because the bedside doesn't change just from outrage. It changes when nurses know the code, know how to research, know how to document, and know how to speak. Aaron, any closing thoughts here? I want to respect your time.
No, I just I appreciate what nurses do. They have very tough jobs. There's a lot to do, and I know that it's asking you to research yet another thing. It just adds a whole nother thing to the plate. I'll just leave you with this. Unlike most drug products that you administer and other products that you utilize in whatever medical setting you're in, the market will typically correct for serious issues because these companies can be held accountable. So if that CPAP machine or if that particular drug are causing serious issues, it will eventually come off the market. There'll be a correction. But with vaccines, because they have immunity, there will never be a correction. So it is that one exception where you are have to look under the hood
Mhm.
because the market's not going to correct. And so, I I urge you to please do so. Again, to Jody's point, that doesn't not to become pro or anti, not to be, to say they're good or bad, but just to start thinking about them instead of just believing in them.
That's right. And guys, his book, Vaccines, Amen. I don't know if you remember me, but I was able to go to your book signing. I got a book
Of
signed.
course I do.
Yes, you are definitely one of my heroes, and God bless you. And thank you so much for being here, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Nurses Out Loud. Nurses are called by our code of ethics to keep learning, do the research, and lead with moral courage and integrity, especially as healthcare changes. Keep doing the next right thing, especially when it's hard. If this show resonated with you, please like, share, and follow. It boosts us up in the algorithm so more people can find us. Until next time, friends, be safe, be well, and God bless. And if this episode offers continuing education credit, check the show notes for the learning objectives, disclosures, and exactly how to earn your certificate.